Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the latest installment of Real Live Relic Hunters' quest to discover long-lost antiquities and artifacts of the world. Very interesting topic for today's discussion. You might have heard about this on the news. This deals with trying to find stolen loot by the Nazis from World War II. So just to give you a basic little background, to add to what you all probably already know, Hitler and the Nazis were fanatics in gathering and looting some of the very famous valuables the world over, right? Paintings, sculptures, tapestries, you name it, they wanted it. So basically, they had a whole organization, a whole plan in mind about how to do this. And the biggest, one of the biggest mysteries thus far, which has not been solved, of course, a lot of the stuff has been recovered, but a lot of the stuff it's anticipated is still out there, it's still missing. And the topic for today's discussion is a supposed Nazi gold train that Hitler and his buddies loaded up at the close of World War II when the Red Army was encroaching on them in 1945. They wanted to get out of there, or at least hide the loot in hopes of finding it later on. So let's look at our map for an instant. And okay, so right here, what you could see is, of course, this all took place in southern Poland in a stretch called the Owl Mountains. Of course, Hitler had overrun Poland in September of '39. This was roundabouts 1944, going into 1945. So the plan was where to hide all this stuff, right? Let's kind of like imagine what happened. They just looted every town that they invaded, every city that they conquered. They just gathered all the spoils, right, as the saying goes. So where to hide all this stuff? So they came up with a plan to build an underground complex of tunnels in the Owl Mountain. And it was a big undertaking, I should say. They had an architect. They had, of course, prison builders, prisoners that were assigned to do this. They had a whole complex of prisons set up in the area. And they got underway and they constructed tunnels. As you can see, looking at here is one of the train lines that went from Wrocław into Wałbrzych. And of course, it was only 4 kilometers long, which is really not that long. And they basically were transporting the stolen loot from Wrocław into Wałbrzych, where the entrance to the tunnels were. Now, you might have heard a couple of years ago there were a few guys that were interested in finding it. Not surprising, right? The loot, by the way, is probably worth in the billions with a B. So it was a hot topic. 2 Polish guys kind of like looked into it. They actually thought they were on a good angle about getting it. They did a lot of research. They had a lot of hints. They even got a deathbed confession from an SS guard, a dying SS guard. Right off the bat, you would think, well, if somebody's on their deathbed, what do they have to lose, right? So the guy apparently told the truth. He was a guard guarding over all this stuff that was happening, this clandestine stuff. And he basically revealed to them that there was a tunnel still unexplored, still undiscovered, that contained these treasures. So these 2 Polish guys, of course, did as much as they could as far as probing around. We'll get to the photos in a minute. But long story short, they thought they had discovered an underground chamber. They did a lot of radar technology and kind of like looking through the ground, so to speak. And it turned out to be just basically an ice cavern. What they thought was a train was basically ice. So their quest got kind of like stopped cold in its tracks. However, just recently a guy came out of Poznan, Poland. I think it was a 38-year-old guy, had a very interesting idea about kind of like following up on the deathbed confession of. Into the what he did was he basically looked into the background of this guy, and he determined that the guy was pretty sane. Okay, so right off the bat, you know, if a guy is sane and he's dying, he's not inclined to lie, right? Usually people don't lie before they die. It was reasoned that maybe if the guy was a little nuts, of course he's going to, you know, hallucinate and maybe say stupid things, but not in this case. This guy was pretty sane. So that was really the basis for his undertaking to try to rediscover where the lost tunnel was. And he did some research, and he came up with some very interesting discoveries, as you'll see in our next map. Okay, so if you look at this map, basically the dotted lines and Wrocław is up to the north a little bit, and Wałbrzych is in the south. And what you're looking at is basically narrow gauge railway. These are different lines that the Nazis put in place to get their loot into the Owl Mountains. Okay, so the darker gauge, the darker colored rail dotted lines are the known rail lines that were basically discovered, and some of them were uncovered. But you know, there's a series of smaller tunnel railway lines. If you can see towards the center of the map, they're kind of like dotted red. Okay, so basically these are kind of like secretive tunnels. They were rail lines, but they were basically pretty much all covered up. And the theory was, when the Nazis were on the run, they intentionally blew up and covered these rail lines to kind of like throw the Allies off. They figured maybe, let's say, well, if they, you know, blew up all these tunnels and they and the Allies were to discover them and there was nothing in them, and then okay, there was no such thing as a Nazi gold train. However, the entrepreneur, 38-year-old from Poznan, reasoned that, well, maybe they did this purposely to throw the Allies off. Maybe there was a tunnel somewhere where they did not want the Allies to uncover it, and they left it covered, and that's where the gold is. So basically, it was a good you know, kind of intuitive observation. Basically, what he did and how he pursued it. And so, as you can see, there are basically a series of tunnels outside of these main tunnels that perhaps still have not been uncovered yet. So, very interesting quest. Okay, so right here, you'll see one of those covered tunnels. It's obviously exposed. The trees on the left here are somewhat old. You can tell by the girth of the trunks. But obviously, there's a clearing in the middle. Now, obviously, what you can see here is an electrical tower. If you can look closely, there's an electrical tower, electrical line built through that clearing, but it was clear before the towers came there. So it's theorized that beneath this ground here may be one of those tunnels. And let's take a look at actually what the inside of the tunnel looks like as discovered in some of the other ones. Okay, so this is an example of what the tunnel might look like, the one that's going to be discovered that holds the stolen loot. Okay, so as you can see, it's basically the width and height that a train can fit through, right? If you put a train track through there, you can probably get a train through there. So it's a perfect dimensional shape for a train. So this one, of course, does not have a rail in there. So why, the question might be asked, did the Nazis build this tunnel in the first place if there's no train rail in there? Well, Hitler actually had some other plans for these tunnels too. In addition to making it kind of like a satellite headquarters office, which he had in various locations, The Nazis actually had secret armament weapons facilities in here. Obviously, this is affected, right? So it was basically a covered up spot that was well protected and pretty much secured and secretive. So it was really the perfect spot to build things, to hide things, and to, you know, take control out of if you wanted to set up an office. And this photo just shows basically the current state of the rail line, still existing, of course. But it's, as you can see, it's a regular train line. You would never know that perhaps on each side of it there were other tunnels, other rail lines that went through there, connections that are now buried up. Albert Speer was the architect of this whole Project Reese. This guy, obviously, as you can see in the photo, was a very close confidant of Hitler. Basically had the whole plan in store, in the works. And if you know something about the Nazis, they were like chess players, right? They always calculated their moves in advance. They figured different outcomes. If you know, this outcome were to happen, what would the game plan be, and such, if so, such and such another outcome would happen, you know, how would they progress? So they were very meticulous in how they were planning things, and Speer was, of course, at the head of the pack of that. Speer was captured, he was arrested, and he was tried after the war. So if it turns out that this latest explorer from Poznan, if he gets his way, of course, politics does play a part in all this, as you can imagine. How much does the Polish government know? How much does the German government know from its past archives? So it is possible that there is a buried Nazi gold train full of very valuable valuables still buried out there. And Real Life Relic Hunter is on it, and we will keep you posted in this very interesting late-breaking story. So thanks again, and tune in again next time for the latest. Bye-bye.